Will the Michigan defense be able to hold Indiana under 200 total offensive yards? That's this question of the week, and we'll get to that later in the episode. This Saturday, number 2 Michigan will be hosting 2-3 Indiana for a noon kickoff, where Michigan is 33.5-point favorites with the over-under being 45.5. Now, we're still a few days away, but the weather is showing that it's supposed to rain all morning and afternoon in Ann Arbor. So that may lean to us seeing more of the running game than we typically see from the Michigan Wolverines. Indiana is coming off their bye week with a 2-3 record. Their losses came to Ohio State, now ranked 14th Louisville, as well as a recent beatdown from Maryland. Their 2 wins were against Indiana State and then an overtime victory against Akron. Let's look at some stats for these 2 teams and where they rank in the Big Ten Conference. A big part that helped Indiana get those 2 wins was their passing game. When they've been most successful passing the ball is when they were able to get those 2 wins. Ironically enough, how they score, though, is with their running game. And so if you really want to slow down the Indiana offense and take control of the game, you need a lockdown on their receivers. Their quarterback, Jackson, has a completion percentage of 61.7%, and he has 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions on the season. They have 7 total rushing touchdowns and only 4 passing touchdowns. Indiana has 3 running backs that each have 2 rushing touchdowns, Lucas, Turner, and Henderson. Their remaining rushing touchdown came from their quarterback, Jackson. So let's bounce over and talk about the Michigan Wolverines. As we're entering the second half of Michigan's schedule, there are a few things that I want to talk about that I've kind of noticed. Of course, I'm sure everyone has seen and heard how there are some doubters of Michigan. Some people aren't talking very highly of them, and they actually don't consider them a huge threat to other top 10 teams. A lot of that comes from people not seeing Michigan as a very explosive or flashy team. But that's okay, because flashy doesn't win big games. Michigan has been dominant, and the style of gameplay that they have will work against most, if not all, their opponents. That actually leads me to talk about where Michigan currently is at, not just during this season, but in the most recent years, and what a great place it is to be. If you can think back to, of course, 2020, but possibly even as soon as 2021, Michigan fans would often get that worry of, man, what is going to happen if something happens to player X? How will the team respond? How will the team fill the gap? But since we've seen things recently, like Edwards filling in for Corum last year, and then other players stepping in for vacant holes left by players such as Will Johnson on defense and also Graham on defense, while you notice they're not there and they definitely have an impact when they get back in the game, the team has done well even when they haven't had them on the field. And that is a great place to be, because a lot of times in the past, fans would freak out, and I wouldn't blame them. I freaked out when Corum went down last year, but this team has great depth across the board. Honestly, there's probably just 2 positions that might be most susceptible for the depth at those positions. And of course, the first being quarterback, the second one being the kicking unit. Honestly, though, we haven't really needed the kicking unit all that much, so that one can kind of be a wash. But at the quarterback position, we have seen some pretty decent things from the backups, enough to the point that most regular season games, you should feel pretty confident that if they were called upon, that they could do enough to have the team still win those games. Now, they're probably not going to be able to come in and win a Big Ten championship or win a playoff game, but during the regular season, you got to feel pretty comfortable right now. And so saying all of that, when was the last time as a Michigan fan you could feel that way, that you felt comfortable, that you felt confident in not just the first string players, but the second string players? It's a great place to be, and it's so exciting to see, because Michigan is not at a place where they need players to come in immediately and start making impact. They have great players at the front line, and then right behind them, they have players who are being able to take time to learn from those ahead of them, get better themselves, so that when they do get into those starting positions, they're ready to go, and it's like the team doesn't even skip a beat. If that doesn't excite you, I'm not sure what will. Now, to address some things about Michigan that we've seen so far that are more on the concerning side, So yes, Michigan has been dominant, but of course, we can look at their schedule and see the different opponents that they've played. I'm not saying that's concerning and looking at the teams later on their schedule, but just from the aspect of the different types of teams that they might face. Some of those top 10 teams that might be concerning are the explosive and flashy teams that people think Michigan wouldn't be able to hang with. I don't think that wouldn't be a problem in most cases. But if they do go up against an efficient offensive team, that might cause them more difficulties. Because if a team is able to come in and start the game off efficient and score multiple times and cause Michigan to slow up and trip up a little bit, a Michigan team down multiple scores at halftime might be tricky for them to dig themselves out of that hole. Not saying it's a huge concern, but that is something to look at if a team is able to put them in that predicament. Now, the defense should be able to do fine in the second half, as they've proven. However, that's how we felt last year when Michigan was going in to play against TCU. And then after halftime and at the end of the game, they wound up letting them score 24 more points than any other game Michigan had played last season. This is not the same team as last year, so I have more confidence, but those are things that you do have to keep in mind. So we'll jump back into our question of the week. Will the Michigan defense be able to hold Indiana's offense under 200 total yards? With a combination of a couple things of the weather, Indiana's leaning on the passing game for some of their success, and also the dominance of Michigan's defense, I'm going to say yes, that they will be able to hold the Hoosiers under 200 total offensive yards and do a repeat for 2 weeks in a row, as Minnesota was their first game that they were able to hold an opponent under 200 total yards. So score predictions. Certainly not expecting it to be quite as high of a scoring game as last time, where the defense themselves put up 14 points for Michigan. While I do think that they will be able to create turnovers and create short fields for the Michigan offense, I don't think we're going to see as many points. So that in tandem with the weather that we're expecting on Saturday, I am looking at a lower scoring game with a final score of Michigan 34, Indiana 7. And honestly, that 7, I'm kind of anticipating probably coming in the fourth quarter during garbage time. Hopefully the weather will clear up for Saturday. I'm not as bothered by rain and snow during games as much as I used to when it seemed to cause havoc for Michigan to play in those conditions, but more so from I like clean conditions to play in, because there's also that concern about increased player safety issues. And just, I like clean play. I want to see the teams play their best and perform at their best, and weather can impact that. So maybe it'll clear up by then. Who knows? We'll see. Also, hopefully it'll clear up for any of you going to the game, because I know how much that can be a drag to be sitting in the cold, wet rain during an entire football game. But until kickoff on Saturday, I do hope that you all enjoy the rest of your week. Until then, go Blue.